Hello and welcome to this special virtual launch event for the Fair Play Pledge, a call for decency during the current election campaign. The rise of the internet and social media has had a profound effect on democracy. We're now living in the digital age, but the rules that govern our democracy have not been updated in decades. A round of elections are imminent, and the fact that they're being conducted during a pandemic means the primary place for campaigning will be the Wild West of online spaces. The UK's democracy laws are robust in the analog sphere, but have not been updated to reflect the increasing digitalization of political campaigning. With the COVID-19 pandemic enhancing this process, 2021 is the right time for all candidates to say they will do things better. That's why Fair Vote UK, Compassion in Politics, Unlock Democracy, the Electoral Reform Society, Open Rights Group, Global Witness, Centenary Action Group, Foxglove, Who Targets Me, The Citizens, and Clean Up the Internet have all come together to call on parties and candidates participating in this May's elections to campaign with respect and compassion, uphold privacy, and champion democracy. This follows on from a similar campaign run in Ireland last year, as well as the creation of the successful #StopTheNastiness pledge run by Compassion in Politics during the 2019 general election. At the heart of this campaign is the ideal of decency, the belief that our politics can and should be better. We are grateful to be joined today by someone who has emerged as a sort of decency hero recently. I'm of course talking about Jackie Weaver, Chief Officer of the Cheshire Association of Local Councils, who has also been a councillor herself. On Twitter, she describes herself as a mother to 3 men and 2 Westies, keen consumer of the horror and apocalypse genre, passionate about local councils, and trying to keep it real. Keep it real she did when, last December, she was brought into Clark a meeting of the Handforth Parish Council Planning and Environment Committee. A highlight reel of the Zoom meeting went viral, and overnight, Ms. Weaver emerged as a symbol of honesty, decency, and strength in the face of shockingly bullying behavior. Labour MP Rosanna Allen Khan noted that beyond the humor, the behavior Jackie Weaver experienced is commonplace in all levels of politics. At the time, she described the incident as surreal, and I imagine the whirlwind that has followed has been similarly so. We're grateful to have her with us today as we launch the Fair Play Pledge, which is really a call on all candidates and parties to put decency at the heart of politics. Ms. Weaver, thank you for joining us, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kyle. And unless I have already upset you, please call me Jackie, not even Jackie Weaver. That works for me.
Okay.
I guess for me, one of the things that I've been trying to do since that video went viral was really encourage people to get involved in democracy. There are lots of barriers to that. I don't need to tell this audience what those are. But particularly the kind of audience I'm trying to attract are younger people and women. And for me, one of the challenges is how we create an environment where those groups and people who are in existing feel safe and feel able to contribute. So I feel really privileged to be part of your campaign. I think the ethos that behind it is hugely important. I think that if politicians particularly think that demonstrating robust behaviour is something that will turn voters on, I think they're sadly mistaken. And I think the video that we saw that went viral made that absolutely clear. But people wanted to get involved, not because they thought that was an impressive way of behaving, but because they want to change it. And this is an opportunity to do that. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you so much. I believe Jennifer is just, here you go, Jennifer.
It's Jennifer Nadel here, co-director of Compassion in Politics. And Jackie, thank you so much for those remarks and your support for the campaign. And you've just done something really extraordinary this year, which is get people talking about local politics, because normally it's only people who are involved in local politics that talk about local politics, but you really shone a light on what's happening and have emerged as, you know, a real beacon and a guiding light for those of us who want to see politics conducted differently. At Compassion in Politics, our goal is to have compassionate policies and also to campaign compassionately. And if we go back in time for a minute to September 2019, before the general election was called, some of you will remember the Labour MP Paula Sherriff talking about how frightened she was because of the online abuse, that she too may be shot like the MP Jo Cox, and her fears were dismissed as humbug by the man who is now our Prime Minister. And in response to that, we had many MPs contacting us and saying, please, can you help? Something's got to change. So we launched the Stop the Nastiness campaign back in 2019. And within 3 days, we had 100 MPs signed up agreeing to not engage in bullying behaviour, intimidating behaviour, and to argue about ideas, not personalities. The election was called and candidates took that pledge, which is now wrapped into the wonderful pledge that that we're here today to launch. And they reported back that when they took the pledge, they were better able to hold their own ground. They were better able not to retaliate when a personal attack came, but to step aside, and that the conversations they had in hustings were far more fruitful because they were talking about the issues, not just simply berating each other. And it's our belief that politics has really lost its moral compass, and this is very dangerous for democracy. Good candidates are being driven out of the political sphere, and all of us have to work together if we care about our democracy. So we used the Stop the Nastiness hashtag last time. We hope people will use it this time. If you see online hate, online abuse, just post the hashtag. Everyone knows what nasty is, and it's got no place in politics. Politics is about life and death. It's about people's lives. It is not a game, and it cannot be treated as a Punch and Judy show, which is what's happening at the moment. So please do sign up to the pledge, everyone, and use the hashtag. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. We are going to be taking questions in just a moment. So if you have a question and you're watching the live stream, you can type it into the chat and those will get picked up and we'll be putting them to our panel. Before we do that, I want to ask Tom Brake, who's the director of Unlock Democracy, to say a few words. Unlock Democracy wants to build a movement demanding democracy in a new constitution grows so big that politicians will have no choice but to listen. Tom, thanks for signing on to the Fair Play Pledge with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Carl. And I guess I'm here as a poacher turned gamekeeper, having been in politics as a politician for 30 years, getting elected to a couple of local councils and then getting elected as a member of parliament. I've experienced this from both sides. And what is very clear over the last sort of 15, 20 years is that particularly with the advent of social media, politics has become much coarser, much cruder, and the ability for people to be critical of their politicians has been greatly enhanced. And I think the anonymity that often comes with social media has made people more comfortable with saying things that they wouldn't say to a politician to their face. So I think it is time that that people support the Fair Play Pledge, because we want people from all walks of life, from all political persuasions, to want to participate in politics. And they can only do that if they feel comfortable campaigning in that environment. And candidates have to take the lead, because very often how a candidate campaigns, what tone they use during their campaign will be picked up by their supporters. So I think there's a duty on candidates to campaign respectfully, but also perhaps to call out their own supporters. If their own supporters are not adopting a suitable tone, not adopting suitable tactics, if they have got sort of parallel support organizations who are supporting them at a distance, but are doing so in a way that is very aggressive, then again, I think those candidates should be speaking out and pointing to the fact they've signed the Fair Play Pledge and encourage their supporters to do so. Clearly, I'm very pleased that one of the political parties, the Lib Dems, has already signed up to the pledge. I fully expect the other parties to do so as well, and I'm sure that they will, because after all, it's in everyone's interest that politics is conducted in a frank, open manner, but also in a reasonable, rational manner that doesn't put people off, either those who want to stand for office or indeed those who are watching what at times looks like something that resembles something that would have taken place in Rome in a gladiators stadium. That is entertaining, but it's not really what politics should be about. So I'm very pleased that Unlock Democracy can support this, and that a range of other organisations are doing so. I hope all the political parties will, and that individual candidates will choose to sign up as well. So thank you for organising this.
Thanks so much, Tom. And we already have a few questions coming in. I just want to remind people quickly of what the pledge says. So there are 5 aspects to it. We are asking candidates and parties to campaign openly, to practice financial fair play, to campaign respectfully, to respect privacy, and to champion defending and enhancing our democracy if elected. Before this event, we did write to all parties in England, Scotland, and Wales, as well as the candidates for Mayor of London. As Thomas said, we are very pleased to say that one political party, the Liberal Democrats, have already signed on, and Sadiq Khan as well, candidate for Mayor of London, has already signed the pledge. We, of course, hope that all parties and candidates will do so. And to do that, you can write to us directly, or you can sign up at fairplaypledge.co.uk. And don't worry, for members of the public and voters out there, there's a role for you to play too. We need to make sure politicians understand that basic decency is an election issue this May. So you can go to fairplaypledge.co.uk and add your name to the public letter calling on all candidates and parties to sign the pledge. All right, so let's go to questions. The first one I'm going to take from Jackie has typed into the chat. I think it's a great place to start, Jackie. Is it easier to hide weak policies and ideas behind personal attacks? Jackie, do you want to start?
Well, I say I am not politically active. Local democracy is hugely important to me, but town and parish councils of themselves are not political. And as I watch it, I often think how much easier it is to attack someone for wearing a blue shirt or for having a beard or whatever, rather than looking at the actual words that you've said. And for me personally, it always feels weak. It gives me no insight as to what the party is standing for, and makes me fear that if I'm voting for that person, I am voting for them because I like the colour of your shirt, Kyle.
I couldn't agree more with what Jackie's just said, and I think it's the lowest common denominator to appeal to that basic mean side that all of us humans have, and that actually true leadership is about elevating ourselves above those base attacks. And I visited the Scottish Parliament just before lockdown and spoke to one of the speakers there and said, you know, why isn't anyone barracking each other or making animal noises? And they just said, because it's not a kindergarten and they'd have to leave the room straight away if they did. And yet we have the mother of all democracies being conducted like it, you know, as Tom said, as if it's a gladiatorial ring or a Punch and Judy show. And that sets the tenor for debate. And I think part of the problem is that we see politics as this binary winning, losing tug of war over my way, your way, and it's about victory. What we don't do is all sit down and say, okay, we've got these common issues. We all, as politicians, care deeply about this country. How can we solve this problem? How can we eliminate poverty? How can we make sure no one goes homeless? But instead of sitting down and saying, okay, let's just sort this out, politicians come up with an ideology, and that ideology has to be fought for, irrespective of what the consequences of it will be. So I think it's quite right. It's easier to mount personal attacks. It's easier to lampoon the opposition than it is to do the harder work of actually just being open, being curious, listening to what the other side has to say, listening to people with lived experience, and having a proper collaborative conversation about how to solve these problems which affect us all.
The only thing I would add to what has been said is that I think this is where our personal responsibility comes in. So if one of the candidates that I support, for instance, is indulging in personal attacks, then I think it'd be perfectly appropriate for me to ask my preferred candidate why they are doing that, and ask them instead to clarify their position on some important local issue around housing provision or transport, and really sort of challenge them to consider the approach that they're adopting. So I think we can individually respond to that, including when it is candidates that we support who are taking this action, inappropriate action.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, it's the sort of incompatibility of the seriousness of the problems we're facing at the moment and the complexity of the solutions with the frequency of voting. And one of the questions that just came up is, how do you solve this problem, which I want to pose next. But I do wonder if problem with the problem is that it requires a level of just good actor, being a decent person. You can't sort of legislate for every negative actor. And so it's about, as we've been saying, sort of elevating good actors and praising them, which is what we're hoping to do with this campaign, is to let people associate themselves with a commitment to goodness. I wonder if others have thoughts on solutions to this problem of sort of basic decency in politics.
Well, we have one, which is that ACAS has a definition of workplace bullying, which applies to almost every workplace in the country. And yet somehow our Parliament and our council chambers aren't subject to the rules that everyone else is. So we would just like that ACAS definition of bullying to be applied to places where politics is conducted, so that the same workplace conduct that would be unacceptable in any other workplace becomes unacceptable. The unacceptable has become normalized, and that is part of the problem. And the consequence is that people are losing faith in democracy. First of all, they lose faith in politicians, then they lose faith in the democratic process, and that is absolutely terrifying, especially as we enter this post-truth age where people are voting not on the basis of facts and information, but on the basis of charismatic leadership. So I think it's just very simple. Let's apply the same rules to politics that we would to any other workplace, and just wouldn't be allowed.
I would add to that, apply the same rules as you would apply to one of your own family members. Would you be happy speaking to them in the way that you're communicating with someone who is a candidate standing for election? The fact that they're a candidate doesn't make them doesn't mean that everyone has a free hit. I was told a couple of days ago that finally a case involving someone who had threatened a number of members of parliament before the 2019 election had finally got to court. That person issued a number of death threats to members of parliament, including me, as I was then an MP. Now, it may be that sitting at home, perhaps after 3 pints of lager or 10 pints of lager, it may seem amusing to issue death threats to people, but in practice, the recipients feel vulnerable, or if they don't, they may feel that their family members are vulnerable when those things happen. And more recently, in relation to local traffic calming proposals and cycling lanes, a local councillor found that on social media, one of the people who objected to the cycling measures was offering to confront the councillor in a boxing match in a boxing ring. Well, that is not the sort of thing that is going to encourage anyone to take part in local politics. We need people of all political persuasions to be involved in local politics. I certainly found it an extremely rewarding thing to be involved with, to get elected to a local council. You're very close to your community. You can do an awful lot of good, but a lot of people are going to be put off if what they find is that there is a sort of lynch mob mentality on social media when people don't like proposals. Well, frankly, if people don't like proposals, there are regular elections where they can put themselves forward for election. And if they've got a better set of policies than someone else, then maybe they'll get elected. But we need to take the heat out of politics, because unfortunately, as we saw with Joe Cox, if you raise the temperature in politics, sometimes people who are not rational are going to respond, and that can be catastrophic. So that's why, again, I think the Fair Play Pledge, getting people to sign this, get them to think about it when they're campaigning, get them to publicize it amongst their supporters, can make a very positive contribution to our political debate.
I think it's also a fair point that we do, in fact, although it's broadly based on the ACAS code, we do in fact have a code of conduct for local councillors. But we've been campaigning at local level for the last 11 years to have some form of sanction included in that. So at the moment, any breach takes an inordinate amount of time and money to investigate, even when they are found, unless a criminal offence has been undertaken, which isn't very often. There's virtually no sanction at all, not even the ability to require the member to undertake training before they can return to the council, or in fact to remove them from the council for a fixed period of time. And particularly when you're talking about bullying, you have a situation where often the bully is the employer and the victim is the employee, the clerk, and there is no safety for that individual in the current system. And yet government successively refuses to introduce sanctions.
I think that's a good, so again, this is your question, Jackie. Then I want to move to two more that we have, but do we confuse aggression with strength?
I mean, that's a I say was my question, but I but I'll answer it as well. I think we do. I think that sometimes when people are trying to project an image that says that I'm in charge, I know what I'm doing, I'm competent and I'm confident, then that comes across as aggression. And I think that we have a lot of people out there who actually emulate, I think this is the point that Tom was picking up really, they emulate what they see. So that if they see people who are supposed to be the top echelons of our society, our elected members, behaving in a way that is aggressive, then that surely is what we're all aiming for, because they got to the top doing that.
And I also think that culturally we're conditioned to respect that aggressive male. And, you know, we are in a process as a society and as a world to try and deconstruct those notions which have really kept us all oppressed, have kept women oppressed, have kept people of colour oppressed. So what we're really talking about is structural inequality and the abuse of power and the ability that those with most strength have had to push through and get what they want. And culturally, we need to recognise that that's not what we want, and we have to rewire ourselves. And unfortunately, I think what Brexit has done is it has legitimised hate in a way that has not been legitimised in my lifetime, certainly in the political field, and things that were unacceptable have become acceptable. You know, arguments that inflame and incite race hate have come about. You know, this whole anti-woke movement that has come about as a backlash to actually just trying to improve the rights and the equality of our society. So what I do know that though is, Kyle, and you talked about the good in all of us, that all of us have a yearning to be good. But if we find ourselves culturally in an environment where our survival instincts are triggered because it's a place of fear and threat, we're going to come out fighting. And what the great thing about the Fair Play Pledge is that everyone who signs it is joining a new club, a club that runs by a different rules. And the rules are that we're honest, we display integrity, we don't retaliate, we don't manipulate statistics to win an argument. We stand in our own truth, and that is incredibly attractive to voters. They just haven't seen enough of it, and it's time that they saw more of it.
Jackie, can I just ask, what was your experience after the video went viral? Because a few of the questions are around whether social media and the internet has made this worse. And I always wonder, is it just that it's shifted to a new space, or is it actually worse? So I wondered, both the positive and the negative in the aftermath, right after your sort of going viral, as the kids say.
I mean, that's a really interesting question. And when it first happened, I guess my concern was that it would have a negative effect on people wanting to get involved with local democracy. And given that I spent 25 years of my life trying to promote it in the background, that really was, that would have been an awful thing. But it wasn't my experience. My experience has been that people have really connected with it. People have said that actually it was good to see in a very strange kind of way. I mean, first of all, it looked kind of funny to start off with, but then you look at what's behind it. And what was more worrying, I think, were the number of people that came forward from all walks of life that were saying, actually, that happens to me every day in my job. I have a board, or I have a committee or whatever, nothing to do with politics, and this is still my experience. And I guess I kind of felt that at that moment that I'm kind of like really dull. I mean, I live in a rural area. I have nice friends, nice view and everything. And I really thought the world was a different place than I'm finding it is. And that scares the heck out of me, because I thought we'd made more progress than it seems we have. But we sure as heck need to get this sorted. I mean, if we can't even live in a world where people can be nice to each other, I'm not asking anything much more than that, common decency, then we really are in trouble. But the statistics, which I'll try not to manipulate, are definitely saying that more people are taking an interest. More people have inquiries through the local elections team, I'm finding in Cheshire, and more people are actually bearing witness, which I think is hugely important, to their local council meetings through websites and through Zoom. And so it has, in effect, been a positive move, I think.
Thank you so much. And very last question before I just go back to the pledge. Are you a super fan of Britney Spears, or did it just come to mind in the moment?
I'm afraid that the trouble with that is it shows where my musical tastes start. I'm trying to think about the absolute opposite of Jackie Weaver. Britney Spears was what I came up with.
Oh, well, it was fantastic. And thank you all so much. I wanted to just review the pledge again and remind people of how they can get involved. So we're asking candidates and parties to campaign openly, financial fair play, which means don't try and get around the rules, follow the rules around expenditure and reporting expenditure, campaign respectfully, respect privacy, and if elected, champion defending and enhancing our democracy. And I have to say, we came up with these, we thought to ourselves, this seems pretty basic. This seems like something we should just expect of people, which is why we're really hoping that all parties and candidates who are standing for election this May will sign up. And as Jackie said, if you're a member of the public and you're wondering what you can do, you can start by adding your name to demand candidates do this at fairplaypledge.co.uk. And maybe the next thing for you is running for local government and getting yourself into office and making a difference that way. So please spread the word. Ask your candidates in your local area, have you signed the pledge? And if they haven't, send them to fairplaypledge.co.uk. I want to thank all the partner organizations and Jennifer and Tom for joining us as well. I want to thank Nico and Matt from our team who have made all of this possible. And of course, thank you to Jackie Weaver for your time. To all of you out there, democracy belongs to you. So let's work together to demand better. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.